Well, I want to talk now about an interesting thing that happened here in Washington yesterday. A vote taken by the U.S. Senate to ratify a United Nations treaty aimed at promoting and protecting rights of disabled people in the country and around the world. It's actually based on this country's own Americans with Disabilities Act, signed into law by George H.W. Bush in 1990. Now, essentially, the ratification of this treaty would be a signal, a push to the rest of the world to do what the United States has already done in terms of banning discrimination, in terms of making buildings and transportation more accessible to those who, for whatever reason, need that extra assistance. It encourages other countries to be more inclusive, but by the way, it doesn't change at all any U.S. laws already in place. The issue even united two unlikely senators, Republican Senator John McCain and Democratic Senator John Kerry, two men who also happen to both be veterans.
It just says that you can't discriminate against the disabled. It says that other countries have to do what we did 22 years ago when we set the example for the world and passed the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I would remind my colleagues that virtually every major veterans organization in America, people who represent those men and women who have fought and particularly try to assist those with disabilities that are a result of combat.
Well, another veteran, 89-year-old former Senator and presidential candidate Bob Dole, was wheeled on the floor by his wife, coming straight from the hospital. Dole also wrote a letter, which Senator McCain read aloud, also urging the ratification of this treaty. It needed 66 votes, or a two-thirds majority, and it only got 61 votes. Why, you might wonder, would anyone vote against a treaty that urges people to not discriminate against disabled people? Some of them who, by the way, became disabled fighting for this country in Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, a theory started circulating that ratifying a UN treaty would harm U.S. sovereignty and also would somehow interfere with those who chose to homeschool their children or send them to private school. Here's Utah Republican Mike Lee.
I simply cannot support a treaty that threatens the right of parents to raise their children with the constant looming threat of state interference.
Former presidential candidate Rick Santorum, whose young daughter Bella is disabled, called the outcome a victory, saying that parents, not guidelines of a treaty, should be the prime factor in making decisions about those with disabilities. Now, supporters of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities have vowed to bring up the matter in the next Congress, and perhaps we'll have a chance to do so. But it looks like they'll have to work even harder to convince Republican lawmakers that supporting an end of discrimination and promoting inclusiveness will not, in fact, harm the country or a handful of people in it who homeschool their children.